Are you ready for rapid fire?
I think so. I think the only way to wrap up this show is to do some rapid fire.
I hear you. I hear you. Thank you very much, Decaf 18. And let's do it. So we're going to start with Sam Hartman, who was actually on Sports Center earlier today. Would you be more surprised if Sam Hartman throws 40 touchdown passes or if he throws 15 interceptions this season?
So this was a tough one for me because
It was meant to be tough. I'm glad that I made it tough.
so I looked at just regular season 12 games for both of these. 15 interceptions means you're throwing like 1.25 per game, and if you're throwing 40 touchdowns, it's like three and a third touchdowns per game. I think I would actually be more surprised if he threw the 15 interceptions because I don't think he's going to throw as many this year. Maybe compared to the last 2 seasons where he's seen a little bit of a spike in interception. I just think that's naturally going to be because his pass attempts are going to be down, and I think they're going to be more kind of methodical. I think it a lot of times he was just kind of asked to make something happen. But at Notre Dame, I think there's going to be like intent with just about every sort of pass, right? Like, and I'm not saying that's going to be the case for every game because there's going to be instances where he's going to have to create, but again, I just think that the passing is going to be more methodical this season, and I think 40 touchdowns is a lot, and that means that again that he's pushing 3 to 4 touchdowns per game. I think the running game is going to contribute to some of these touchdowns
Right.
throughout the season as well. So I think I'm going to end up saying the interceptions. I don't think he gets to 40. I'd be surprised if he got to both of those actually, but I'd be more surprised if he got to 15 interceptions.
Yeah, I mean, he was knocking on the door of 40 for the last 2 years, 38 and 39. Again, different system he's going to be playing in, but also, again, as we keep reminding people, he's going to have a much better offensive line. I don't think he's going to be sacked 35 times like he was 2 years ago or 34 times like last year at Wake Forest between the running game and a much better offensive line that he's going to have. And I think the biggest question we have in terms of what exactly is this passing game going to look like? You know, there is the give and take, sort of the yin and the yang. There is a running game. How is that running game going to potentially take away from maybe the chance to get to 40 touchdowns, for example? Because again, Wake didn't have much of a running game. I looked at Caleb Williams last year. He threw 42 touchdown passes at USC. USC also had 30 rushing touchdowns last season, which is actually 5 more than Notre Dame had. So I don't think just because you have a strong running game along with a good quarterback and potentially, a really good passing game, I don't think that necessarily, that one negates the other. I think that you get some vertical shots downfield and maybe you end up inside the 10-yard line, you end up with a rushing touchdown or you're running in the middle of the field and you get a play action and you hit a shot downfield, now you're in the end zone. I don't think the running game is necessarily going to take away from Sam Hartman's ability to still put up some really big numbers from a passing standpoint. I just think that it's all going to complement each other. So like you, I think that the passing touchdown, will he get to 40? I'm not positive he'll get to 40. I think he's got a really good chance to get to at least 35. That's, like if I were making an over under, we did the Vegas over under last week, which is only 26 and a half, which is insane that it's that low. Like I would put it at least at 29 and a half and maybe even up a little higher at like 33, 34 and a half, something like that, So I think he's got a really good chance to get the touchdown passes. I'd be surprised if he throws that many interceptions because I think that that's where he'll be impacted, more. Like he doesn't have to maybe take as many chances throwing the football. He'll be able to rely on that run game. And his decaf 18 is saying play action will be big. And, DJ saying also hoping we see a lot more RPO. And that's something that they're getting accustomed to as well is the old RPOs, bringing the RPOs back. So I think that's going to be good as well. So there are 44 days to go until Notre Dame kicks off the season against Navy in Dublin. And No 44, of course, corresponds with Junior Tuihalamaka's jersey number. Tuihalamaka moving to Viper this season, and the Viper defensive end, where he'll likely be, you would expect anyway, behind Jordan Botelho there. My question to you, over under 6.5 combined sacks and tackles for loss for Junior Tuihalamaka this season?
I'm a little biased here because I think that he's going to have a pretty
You're very
breakout
high on
season.
Junior Tuihalamaka.
Yeah, and I've been on the record before saying that. I think that he actually shatters that. I would more so set it at like 11.5, meaning he gets 1 sack or tackle for loss per game, essentially.
Hold on, before you
definitely
continue,
hitting the over.
Before you continue, here's the reason I set it at 6.5, because Justin Adamalola, that was his combined number last year, 6.5, and he was essentially where Tuihalamaka is right now, the number 2 Viper behind Isaiah Foskey. He had 3.5 tackles for loss, 3 sacks. So that's why I set it at 6.5. So you think the number needs to be set a lot higher at 11.5? Is that what you said?
That's maybe too drastic. I'd say like 9.5. 9.5 is where I would set it.
Double digits is the number. I'm fairly confident in that as well, unless Jordan Botelho just turns into a beast and he's too hard to get off the field, then which he very well could. He's got we know, like Vince and I did the rankings of the top 10 guys on the roster this season. Botelho just missed for both of us. Like, from a pure ability standpoint, athletic ability, the whole thing. And this is kind of what I tried to explain when we were explaining that. It's like, it's not good enough just to be a good athlete and thought of as a good player. You also have to be someone who everyone is fairly confident has put it all together and you're ready to go right now. And that's why I had to leave Botelho off. So there should at least be some opportunities for Junior Tuihalamaka. I like that 9.5 that you're talking about. I think I would still go over, just like you as well. But you're even higher on him than I am.
Yeah, I just feel like overall what makes him so special is he has linebacker speed, and he's going to be able to come down and play a position where speed helps, and that's what kind of separates you and creates you, essentially makes you an elite, especially when it comes to pass rushing. But like, you don't need elite speed, right? Like the Bosa brothers don't have elite speed. Like they run between like 4.8s and 5.0s. And he's faster than that, and he's very strong and physical. And I know that because they've worked him in as, like the 3 technique and some of their defensive packages as well, an interior defensive lineman. So really that just shows to me that you have the strength. Like you don't get those opportunities if you can't hold your own in those situations. And I really like his overall athleticism in a position that requires less athleticism than what he had to do in the past. So I think it's kind of like he's unlocked kind of more potential, I think, at a position because he has an excess of athleticism and speed.
I agree. I think that this could be a really good fit for him, especially with these other linebackers that are coming in behind him. Derek says leaving Botelho off my list puts me on his list. Good point. Touche. By the way, hit the like button if you would, kind of boost us up there a little bit right now. We would appreciate it. We always appreciate you smacking that like button.
These are the dog days. We're getting close to the season.
I know. That's right. In fact, we got word today. We can officially say when fall training camp begins. We're not supposed to give out the full schedule, but we are allowed to say when training camp begins. So day 1 of training camp is going to be Wednesday, July 26th. And there will be a practice availability for the media that day. Wednesday, July 26th, first day of training camp. That's right. 2 weeks from yesterday will be the first day of camp. So we've known that for a while. We just got the official word that we could actually say when it starts. They just don't want us giving the full schedule out of, all of our availabilities and when practices are and all that kind of stuff. So we'll be there 2 weeks from yesterday when training camp begins. Looking forward to it. It's on the way. All right. This is an interesting one. And I saw this. I think somebody posted it on the boards. Football Scoop had this story up. Former Michigan tight end Jake Butts tweeted a story about how Jim Harbaugh reworked their practices in his first spring as head coach there. Players, of course, are allowed a maximum of 4 hours per day with the team. So rather than split it up like, here's some meeting time, here's some practice time, and splitting it up like that, they just took all 4 hours and put the guys out on the field. That's where they did it. Not only did they do that, Harbaugh split the team into an A team and a B team. They would have the B team practice by themselves for 2 hours from 1 to 3 p.m. Then the A team would show up and they would practice with the B team from 3 to 5 for their first 2 hours. So then by the end of that 2 hours, the B team was done. They'd completed their 4 hours. The A team stayed for 2 more hours by themselves. In total, the coaches were out there for 6 hours, but each group of players, the A team and the B team, got 4 total hours, some by themselves where they got a ton of reps, some, where they're mixing it in and doing other stuff. So my question to you, Jesse, is, like we've talked about player development, especially with these young quarterbacks for Notre Dame, like Steve Angeli, Kenny Menchie. We were just talking about this yesterday. Potential early enrollee in CJ Carr next spring, not to mention, you're going to have a couple key losses, 3 key losses on the offensive line, both tackles and the center, most likely, linebackers, running back. So there's going to be some youth out there. Would reformatting practice like this, what kind of benefit do you think it could have, especially from those quarterbacks, where like getting reps, get the most reps possible? What do you think? You've played before. What do you think about this format?
Yeah, so like the main thing I would consider here is that it's in the spring. And the spring is a considerably more of a learning period,
Right.
than fall camp. When you get to fall camp, it's time to buckle down and figure out what's going to happen for the season. But in the spring, when there's a lot of learning going on, a lot of younger guys like you kind of touched on, potentially Notre Dame's situation next year, I do find this actually to be really interesting and something that could be beneficial. And I've never heard of it being this way before. And a lot of it too is, like you said, you only get 4 hours, and that includes meetings, film time, etc. So it sounds like they're just cutting out all meetings and film time, and their only concern is about what you're doing on the field. And in the spring, again, that's beneficial because for these younger guys, I would much rather have 2 extra hours on the field than sitting in a meeting room and kind of boringly watching film.
You're not game planning in the spring. The film's not quite as important, I wouldn't think.
Yeah, it's basically all the film is the only time the film is beneficial is basically when you're doing the combined stuff, when you have, offense versus defense, but a lot of it's just individual periods and, working through position group drills and etc. So I do think it'd be very beneficial because you're getting these guys would be younger and getting more, hands-on time with the coaches. And me as a learner, it's always been, I'd rather do it and kind of learn by mistake than learn and watch on film and then, kind of get roasted in the film room and then have to go back out there the next day. It's just, I think it leads to more confidence ultimately because these guys will have the opportunity to really learn through their mistakes out on the field. And it's kind of crazy that the coaches are out there for 6 hours in something like this. And I think it was beneficial. Another reason I think it was beneficial is because it was Harbaugh's first year. So it sounded like he really kind of wanted to repave, the foundation and the fundamentals. So that's another kind of thing that played into it. I'd be curious to see if it still goes on now. I would probably say no.
I don't think it does.
We just talked to, like, he's probably got the foundation set on a lot of this stuff.
And that's what, I kind of abbreviated what I read there from, for that Jake Butts put up there on that, it was a long thread kind of thing. But that was the point, is that's how he essentially sort of rebuilt the culture and, like all that kind of stuff when he came in the door by doing this. And he basically said, look, you get better by actual playing out there on the field, just what you were talking about, not by sitting and watching film. And again, when you're doing it in the spring, there's still going to be some benefit. And I'm not saying, because just like what you're saying, this was the first season Harbaugh did this. I'm just saying for this specific instance, especially with the young quarterback situation and trying to find out what you've got in your quarterbacks, I think it could be very beneficial, because if those three go through this season, or two go through this season, Angeli and Minchie, and then Carr joins them in the spring potentially, you still have three completely unproven, lacking experience quarterbacks, even less experience than what you had starting off last fall with Buckner and Pine. So I'm not suggesting that they should make every practice like this, where the coaches are out there on the field for 6 hours and the players are out there on the field for the 4 hours that they're talking about. But like at least once a week, I think that there would be a lot of benefit in it. Like you do that, and then maybe you with some film, watching some of the things that you did, constructive criticism from those practices and that kind of stuff. But again, especially from the quarterback situation, most important position on the field, the more reps you can get, the better. So I think there'd be a lot of benefit for Notre Dame in that with those quarterbacks that they're going to have next spring.
Yeah, and you touched on it, just kind of hit the hammer on the head there. It's the quarterback development is the area that would need / see the most benefit from this. And
accelerate the quarterback development.
Yeah, exactly. We talked yesterday about, what that would look like. And we've talked about in the past, like what would make us feel comfortable. And it's just, they got to start the system somehow. And I think that would be a great Kickstarter of trying to figure out and go through a lot of quarterback development, because then in the spring, you can really assess, where you are at comfortably, right? Like before the start of the season. And I think there would be an opportunity for another transfer portal window in there too, after, if things are looking just completely horrible, which I don't think that they would, but it gives you again a better chance to give, a breakdown or analysis of all these quarterbacks and what they can do.
Yeah, I mean, you could put them in a lot of different situations. Like some of the best coaches that I had in high school, this has been a while, but like the best coaches I had, like we practiced, live situations, at different points in practice, whether it was the beginning or the end. And, you always hear like you don't rise, you don't rise to the occasion, you fall to your level of training, basically, you hear that kind of stuff. And I think that that's completely true. They could put these quarterbacks in different, at least pseudo live situations as well, in just a lot of instructional periods out there by doing something like this. And again, like if you've got, two guys in the A group and then, one of the guys in the B group and then a walk-on or whoever else it happens to be, then you could rotate those quarterbacks around so that, and you wouldn't have them, you wouldn't like have them throwing their arm off and that kind of stuff, but still you could get them a heck of a lot of reps in a situation like that. So I think it's really, really intriguing to see the way that they did that. And I mean, like when you look at how Harbaugh at Stanford, San Francisco, and then Michigan was able to turn things around at all three of those stops, and then you look at something like this as an example of something that he's did. I mean, he's done. You don't have to like him, but
he's got good ideas.
He's a good coach. He's shown he's a good coach. He's obviously,
a little quirky,
a little outside the lines, a little quirky, but yeah, still a good coach, knows what he's doing. All right, so the MLB Players Association wants the pitch clock rules loosened so that they have more time between pitches and maybe the ability, like to step off the rubber a little bit more during the postseason. Do you buy or sell this idea?
Yeah, I buy this actually. And this was going to, like, when these rules were announced at the beginning of the season, I think that's great. For the regular season, it's a grind of 162 games. If you're going to have that many games, you can't have average time of 3.5, 4 hours, whatever it might be. So yeah, I'll all aboard on that. But when you get to the playoffs, it's obviously a much smaller pool of teams, and the stakes are much higher. I think you've earned the right, or kind of the reward, to have loosened pitch clock rules, because every pitch ultimately matters, right? Like you're not just trying to get through the game or rush through the game. I think that my rules would be you get one more, disengagement per in the playoffs per at bat, and then you get 5 seconds added per at bat. So if no one's on, you get 20 seconds, and if you got runners on, then you get 25 seconds. I think that it's fair to say that the playoffs would reward 5 more seconds per pitch and one more disengagement per batter, because again the stakes are higher, and in the playoffs, guys stealing bases and in those runs, every run's going to matter essentially. So I buy this, and I hope that they do it, because of I like to see, since the stakes are higher, more conscious effort going into each pitch.
But shouldn't you be used to it by the time the playoffs roll around? Like the
Yeah, you
college
should be
baseball
used
has
to
had
it,
this
but
for a couple years, and like the College World Series, I don't remember seeing any pitch clock issues during the College World Series. Guys are just used to it by now.
yeah, I see that. But again, I just think that the stakes are just a little bit ramped up. And so I don't mind. Playoff baseball is a lot easier to watch than a regular season game on a Tuesday. So I don't mind if the game goes 15 to 30 seconds, or sorry, 30 minutes longer. If just
See, I
because
do.
pitchers are getting a little bit extra time.
Those are actually the games that matter more, and those are the games that more people are going to be watching. Like baseball during the regular season is watched regionally. It's not watched on a national level. Like John is saying, the pitch clock should be eliminated. Chi-Town doesn't like the pitch clock either. I've said before, from a TV standpoint, I like the pace of the game. If I'm at the game, it's a little bit different. I don't mind the length of the game as much, but these games, especially when you get into the LCSs and the World Series, and these games are starting after 8:00, those are the ones that you want to make sure go quicker, because you want people to actually watch from start to finish. So, here's the problem with the Players Association. The Players Association basically let Major League Baseball, when they were negotiating this deal a year or two ago, they let Major League Baseball say, okay, you can change the rules you want, basically so they could get more money. They gave up the right to negotiate these rules so they could get more money. And now on the backside, they've got their money, and now they want to come back in and say, well, we don't really like these rules that much. You need to change them for the postseason. So I'm completely fine with them the way they are. I'm not pushing back against them the way, some other people are. So I say stick with them. Once you get through 182 games, you should have a better feel by then of what you need to do. So I don't think you need to go changing things once you get to the postseason.
Yeah, I like the rules, don't get me wrong. And if they didn't change them, I wouldn't be upset about it. But I understand kind of, I guess, the logic for why you would want it, just because of, again, the stakes are heightened.
Like the step off thing, again, like I wouldn't mind maybe one more step off. I wouldn't go changing the clock, because I get what you're saying. Those runs do matter, obviously, especially once you get to the postseason. Decaf says, sell. They don't need to adjust their cups and readjust their batting gloves. I do that. Chi-Town says, why do we want games shorter? When I go to Wrigley or Kaminsky, I know the Chi Sox play at a newer stadium. I want the game to run over. And that's what I completely agree. That's what I was just saying. When I'm at a game, I don't care how long the game lasts. It's mostly when you're watching it on TV. Nobody wants a 3.5 hour game when you're watching it on TV, especially if it starts at 8:30 at night in the postseason. That's the biggest reason they've made these changes, because viewership has gone down so far. They want renewed, they want much more interest from younger demographics. There was too little action actually going on in the field. Their audience was already in the 50 plus age demographic and getting older by the year, basically by the minute it was getting older. They needed to find a way to try to draw in a younger crowd. And that's why they did this, to try to shorten things and to bring more action into the game again, so that there were actually things going on in the game. And so far it's been better this year.
I can't remember. I saw a stat. I can't remember what it was exactly. I was actually trying to find it right now, but I'm pretty sure I saw that the new rule changes have been such a hit so far that they've lowered like an age metric by like 5 years or something already, basically.
Really?
Like, yeah, the average.
I hadn't seen that.
I can't remember. I wish I could pull it up, but they've already they've already shown that like these new rules have really had a great effect so far, and it's lowered, something between like the viewership between a certain age demographic and that average has gone down by at least 5 years, I want to say.
Wow, that's pretty impressive in that short amount of time that they've already been able to do that. But again, like I said,
that was the goal.
When I go to a game, I don't care how long it lasts. In fact, there are people who, we're talking about suing because it's like you're paying the same amount of money, but you're getting like an hour less at the ballpark, to actually do your thing. And they were talking about suing and trying to lower the ticket prices and all that kind of stuff. And, you go to a lot of games, so you can, probably speak to it. Even I haven't been to a big league game so far this year. Can you tell a big difference when you're at a game?
Yeah, I mean, you really can, and I think what was shown is that I wasn't at the game, but a week ago, the Guardians played their quickest game ever, and it was like an hour and 53 minutes, and it's even more prominent at Guardians games because they're low scoring, not a lot of hitting, and just a lot of small ball, and so you can definitely tell the pace of game is like quicker. They get through the games much faster. But I'm like you, at the game, I don't care because everything seems to go by quick when you're at the game. But when I'm at home, and that's where I'm watching majority of the games, right? Like majority of the games, you maybe go, unless you're a season ticket holder, the casual fan probably goes to like 2 to 3 games at maximum per year. So the rest of the games, I like, and I watch a lot of Cubs games on TV. Like I enjoy getting through those relatively quickly because of that reason. I can get it done with, and my girlfriend doesn't like watching a 3-hour game compared to a 2 to 2.5 hour game, right? Like everybody wins in that situation.
Yeah, Chi-Town says the old guys have all the money. That may be true, but here's the problem, Chi-Town. If your only demographic right now is an older demographic, in 20 years, you have nobody watching on TV and nobody at the ballpark. That's why you have to shoot for a younger demographic. That's, just like, I think we've talked about this before, like Jesse, you grew up going to Notre Dame women's basketball games, and 20 plus years ago, that national championship season, the 2001 season, right around that time, the marketing department there at Notre Dame, they were marketing both an older demographic as well as young families. And that combination has helped them keep really healthy crowds inside Purcell Pavilion to watch their games over these years. And what happens now, 20 plus years later, those young families are, middle-aged to older families, but the kids who grew up going to those games, like you, remain fans, and they are paying customers now as well. It's like that's why you've got to shoot for the younger demographic. Like baseball, like people on here, most of we always kind of get poked for it when we talk about baseball. Most people are like, "Oh, baseball is being played. It's when does baseball season start?" They start, and that's the point, because there was so much interest being lost in baseball. But it's kind of cool to see that some of this stuff has helped bring some of that back. So, Jess, the NFL has told the New York Jets they're going to be HBO's Hard Knocks team this season. Meanwhile, Netflix just dropped a series called Quarterback, which followed Patrick Mahomes, Kirk Cousins, and Marcus Mariota throughout last season. So, which of those two are you most interested in?
So I would say I'm more interested in the Netflix series Quarterback, just because it's the new thing, right? Like we haven't seen that before. We don't know what it is. And then obviously it's got Patrick Mahomes on it. Like Marcus Mariota doesn't do a whole bunch for me. Kirk Cousins doesn't do a ton for me either. It's funny Kirk because Cousins. Based on that list, it's kind of like tiered. You get the top tier Patrick Mahomes, you get the middle tier Kirk Cousins, and then you get kind of the lower tier Marcus Mariota. But I'm still interested in the Hard Knocks of the Jets season, and I'm very interested to see, how much Aaron Rodgers content we get and what he's like on camera. And then honestly too, I'm excited to see, some more of like Robert up close and personal and his kind of coaching philosophy, because I respect his defensive mind and, the solid defenses that he always puts together. So that's interesting. But again, what puts it over the top for me for quarterback is it's just the new thing. We haven't seen it before. No one really knows what it is. I've seen Hard Knocks seasons. I know what Hard Knocks is about. But again, it's just like the new thing. And so that's what's ultimately got me more excited.
I agree with what Tanner said. Brittany Mahomes annoys me as well. I just can't believe how much the Jets tried to fight being on Hard Knocks.
Oh, I didn't know that. They didn't want to be on Hard Knocks?
Oh, yeah, you didn't know? Yeah, they resisted. They basically, it came down to 4 teams. The way
I knew the 4 teams, but I didn't know the Jets didn't want to be
the
on.
criteria for teams to be eligible for Hard Knocks. It eliminates teams with first-year head coaches, teams that qualified for the playoffs in the past 2 seasons, and teams that appeared on the show in the last 10 seasons. So it came down to 4 teams that were possible: the Jets, the Commanders, the Saints, and what was the 4th one? Jets, Commanders. And the Bears. The Bears were the 4th one. So those were the 4 possibilities. Nobody wanted to step up and volunteer to do it. Aaron Rodgers signing with the Jets made it seem more and more like it was going to happen. Robert Saleh kept saying no. All this stuff about, it'll be too much of a distraction. It's like, are you kidding? All of these guys, they either have their own podcast or they're doing media or their social media.
There's just extra cameras around. It's not like they're in anyone's way. They do all the shooting, editing, cutting of, put them together themselves. Like the only thing that would be a little bit extra is if they do, some of those kind of like close up or one-on-one little interview excerpts kind of stuff. That would be the only thing that's really extra, because I know they have to stay out of the way with all of their cameras and everything.
Yeah, they're mostly flies on the wall, I think, with the exception of like what you're talking about. They mic up a coach and then they put their cameras in the back of the room, and it's like, they're not up there and in their face, I don't think, all the time. And so and again, as much of this kind of media as there is,
I mean, it's today, New York too. It's like,
exactly.
Your media is central.
Exactly. I cheated a little bit because I actually watched the first episode of Quarterback last night. And it is pretty good. And I think that obviously what differentiates these two is it's the same kind of thing where they're telling a story and they're behind the scenes and they're micing guys up. The difference is this is like, 8 months since the season ended. They put all this together and now they're releasing this series about a week or so before training camps start. Whereas obviously Hard Knocks comes out a week at a time while they're going through training camp. So it's a little bit different the way they're telling the story. And, you actually hit the nail on the head with how you described it. You've got an elite quarterback in Patrick Mahomes. You've got kind of a middle tier quarterback in Kirk Cousins. And then you had a guy in Marcus Mariota who, was I guess he signed with the Atlanta Falcons and, kind of trying to keep his career going and that kind of thing. After the fact, we know how that ended up because Desmond Ridder obviously ended up being, the quarterback there. But in the first episode, they're just kind of starting to tell that story. So it was interesting. It was, it was good. There was nothing earth-shattering in it, but it was fun. It was kind of a souped-up version of Hard Knocks with but like instead of you're telling the story, about, what quirks the head coach has or, some guy at the end of the roster, who was drafted in the 7th round or an undrafted free agent trying to make the team. You're just following these quarterbacks throughout the season and they're kind of in with their families a little bit and stuff like that. So it was pretty good. I thought it was pretty interesting and definitely worth watching episode 2 anyway, and probably keep watching it after that. Hard Knocks, like you said, we've kind of been there, done that. It's almost run its course, I think, at this point. Speaking of which, though, Jerry Jones just sold the rights to a docu-series to Netflix for just under $50 million. It's going to be the Cowboys' rise to prominence in the early 90s. It's already drawn comparisons to The Last Dance. So, Jess, Mr. Fellow Cowboys fan, scale of 1 to 10, how much are you looking forward to seeing this?
Yeah, I mean, as being a passionate Cowboys fan, and probably I would say that the Cowboys are the team that I get the most into in terms of professional sports. I'd have to say my overall excitement is a 9 out of 10, and especially when talking about the early 90s, it was, an era that I've only heard about and partially seen about. But I haven't actually got to, submerge myself in that kind of content before. It's just kind of tales, right? Um, I think the only reason it's not a 10 out of 10 is if Jerry Jones is releasing this and saying it's okay, it's got to portray him in a way that he is the savior, or it was all really his idea that led the charge. So again, Jerry Jones doesn't do anything for no reason, right? He's going to make money off of this, and it's going to paint him to be probably, the guy, the mastermind behind it all.
Saint
So
Jera.
that would be the only thing that would knock my level of excitement down at the end of the day.
I'm very interested in it. I'm reading the book, and I'm kind of I'm a slow reader to begin with, but I also will start reading and then I'll put a book away, and I'll kind of go, oh yeah, I need to go back and read that. But I'm reading the book. Jeff Pearlman, who is the guy who wrote the book that the LA Lakers HBO series is based on. He wrote a book about the Cowboys of that era as well. So I'm kind of reading about that era right now. But I completely agree. That's my biggest concern. Is Jerry just going to take credit for everything? Is he going to give Jimmy Johnson any credit? Is he going to try to rewrite it like he pulled off the Herschel Walker trade and not Jimmy Johnson? That's what I'm really curious what it's going to look like. Just how much he's going to play with the truth, because he's got the money and he owns the team. So I'll be really curious to see that. But I am anxious to see it. And just like we were talking about yesterday, I would love to see something like this on that, like that Lou Holtz era Notre Dame, and even before that, leading up to it from the Faust era into the Lou Holtz era, a series like this. I think it would be perfect. And then, you said something on Rocket. You could do like a whole episode if you did like an 8 to 10, episode series on Notre Dame from that era. You could do a whole episode on Rocket Ismail, I think, if you wanted. So, but to answer the question about the Cowboys thing, very excited, but I have the same concerns you do. I think it's going to be Jerry Jones is going to be best man in history kind of thing.
It's just what it's got to be, right? Like the man, it's just the ultimate ego thing, and there's no way he would sign off on something that gets released that would make him look like the bad guy in any situation. So Be curious to see how that all plays out.
Derek says to you, Jesse, sometime this winter, I'll pick you up, take you to a Monsters game. He says, I let you down, and he's going to fix it by teaching you the best game. Is that like Cleveland? Like, is it AHL or something like that?
Yeah, that's the minor league hockey team. So it sounds as if, I know a little bit of hockey. I don't know enough of it, unfortunately.
Yep. Chi-Town says he'd like a 65-66 season Bears documentary. Butkus, Sayers, Piccolo, Ditka, and Hallis mic'd up would be difficult to pull off. Now, I wonder what kind of they had some stuff mic'd up back in the day with NFL films and all that. But you could throw that Rosemary's Baby, that vintage thing that Butkus had in there, that old quote from him. But I think that would be fun as well.
I'm going to the Italian festival this Friday, so maybe I'll see Derek there. That's a big thing in Cleveland. There's two of them. There's one on the east side over in Little Italy, and there's one in the west side in the Gordon Square that's like walking distance that I'm going to go to tonight and tomorrow. They have tons of good Italian street food, and then there's Italian street gambling games, and it's just a ton of fun, and it raises a lot of money for the local church and everything. So it's exciting times.
Mambo Italiano. That's right, baby. All right. Have fun at the Italian Fest. And you got a wedding you got to go to this weekend too, right?
Yeah. So Saturday, going to a wedding up in Michigan for a good buddy of mine that I played football with in college. And actually, it's funny because it's like, I'm friends with him, but I actually, his girlfriend now, wife to be in a couple of days, we were both math majors together. So we took every
Cool.
math class together. So I'm pretty close
With both
of them at the end of the day. And he actually
Very cool.
transferred out at like our sophomore year, but we still, remain friends. And like I said, I saw him a lot because him and his girlfriend and I were often doing math homework together.
He is your token Michigan fan as well, right?
Yeah. We have he's a big Lions fan, and University of Michigan fan. Every time Michigan and Notre Dame play each other, we go to the game, and then whoever loses the game, so say Michigan loses, he buys me tickets for the next game, and then when Notre Dame wins, when Notre Dame lost, technically I'm on the hook for whenever they play again next. So just a good old friendly rivalry at the end of the day.
Good times. All right. Well, thanks for joining us tonight. We appreciate you. Hit the like button if you would on your way out. We do appreciate that as well. Thanks to Danielle Green. If you missed the Danielle Green interview, of course, you can go back and find it either here on YouTube or on the podcast platform. We'll wrap it up, and we will talk to you Friday live at 5 with the Rapid Fire Show right here on IBC Sports Talk.